I'm Austin Lugo.
I'm Andrew Harp.
This is With Nothing to Say.
Let's talk about our year in review.
Before we get into this week's conversation, as it were, next week we're going to be watching Mondabe. This is a film, Andrew, that you suggested. I know
Mhm.
very little about this world of film. I think this is the first film in Africa that we've done. Have we done any African films
I don't think
before
we've done
this?
any specifically African films. No,
So this will be our first African film, something I'm very excited for. Have you seen any of his work
no,
before?
no, not
Okay,
yet. It's got that big collection on Criterion, so I'll probably try to watch at least like a few more.
absolutely. The
Yeah,
It's the first film written in Akonoa?
I
I
don't
don't know
know.
if it's written in a language. It's the first film to come out
Hmm.
in some language, and I'm not sure which language it is,
Yeah,
but it's exciting. I'm
hmm.
excited.
Me
I mean, it
too.
must be pretty good. They got a whole
Hmm.
collection on there, so clearly there's a lot of love to be had for
Hmm.
this filmmaker. So very excited. Something a little different for us. Traveling to a new part of the world will be very exciting. But
Yeah,
this week, we're talking about our year in review, something we do at the end of every year. As we talked about last time we talked, instead of doing the best films that came out in 2023, we decided to talk about the films for us that was our first watch that we loved the best. And I know we also kind of talking about some of the podcast episodes that we did, but as I was creating my list, I realized one, there's not a single new film on the list, at least for my top five. Although there are some honorable mentions that I will shout out. And two, four of the five films that are on my top five of the year were films that we watched for the podcast, which is kind of crazy. Because I
that's
mean,
interesting.
I watched 200 films this year. I think my letterbox is almost exactly at 200. And yet we watched what 30 to 40 films for the podcast, and four of the five are from that list. So
Yeah, when I
obviously a
when
good
I
year for the podcast.
I kind of did something differently with my list where I kind of like did. I'm kind of like for my list that I put together, my top five list, I did basically like top five like filmmakers that were
Okay,
impactful this year for me. But
sure.
ultimately, I'll probably like hone in on like one film in particular in each list and on each list item.
Yeah.
Um, and I would say of the um two of the list items contain films that we watched for the show.
Um,
Um, yeah.
so I guess we probably should talk about this first. How should we format this? Do you want to do like
Yeah, well, like one of us should go
go back
first
and
and
forth?
just like count down from 5 to 1 and go back and forth, probably.
Okay. Should we start with honorable mentions then before we get into our top five?
Well,
Or should
I
we do
guess
those
like
last?
I'll do honorable mentions like before we do. I want to do my honorable mentions before I talk about my first my number one list
Okay.
item.
So I should start with number five then.
Sure. Yeah. Well,
Okay.
I guess what I'll say real quick, just because it's not included in any of my list, I was
Yeah,
just gonna say that like my favorite movies of the year, 2023, just to kind of like quickly say them in
please.
no particular order, are like May December, Oppenheimer, and Flowers of the Killer Moon. I'm not gonna talk about them in depth just because like I've talked about them already. Everybody's talking about them. They're not particularly obscure or unknown
The
films.
obscure film Oppenheimer.
Yeah, the obscure film Oppenheimer, one of the biggest movies of the year. I those movies were very impactful for me this year, and I'm just gonna throw them out there, but I don't want to like talk about them in depth. I
Yeah.
don't really think it would be very productive, but I'm just throwing it out there.
All right. And then since you threw them out there, I'll throw out there a couple, which actually will be in our after show today because these are all movies that I've watched
Well,
since
I
we last
actually
talked.
I'm busy, so I don't think I want to do an after show today, if
No
that's
after
okay
show
with you.
today? That's
No, I'm
okay.
sorry, but next week we will. I'm sorry.
Next time when we do after shows. So
Yeah,
many
yeah,
missed after shows. That's okay.
I know.
Well, we'll still talk about whenever we do our next after show, along with
Yeah.
a bunch of other stuff. But I think it's kind of amazing that my favorite films of 2023 I've all seen within this last month, which of course December is famously sort of the month of critically, hopefully acclaimed films, and sort of the best films of the year are
Yeah.
often released during this month. So I guess it's not too much of a coincidence. Of course, I still want to see Ferrari, which I think will be on
Fuck
that
yeah.
list, but haven't
Oh
seen
my
it yet.
God.
Hoping to see it in the next couple of weeks. I'm seeing Godzilla with Brandon on Tuesday. I tried to get
Hmm.
him to see Ferrari, but he really wanted to see the new Godzilla. So I think that'll still
Yeah.
be a great watch.
Yeah.
But two of the films that I did want to mention that I thought were just incredible watches and some of my favorite films of the year were Dream Scenario, Nicolas Cage. Incredible film. Uh, just fascinating and weird. And
Well,
I
yeah,
think it
you
was
did the solo episode
performance.
about that. So if
And I
people
did
want
a
to hear your
solo
thoughts on
episode.
it,
So
they
yeah,
can just
yeah.
go to that.
So if you want to hear my full conversation with myself on that one, you can hear that on our podcast, YouTube, wherever you find us. And the other
Mhm.
one is Poor Things, which I just saw in theaters 4 or 5 days ago. I saw it with my mother-in-law. It was just me and Shelly.
Mhm.
Uh, a
Wow.
very interesting experience. It's very sexual. I don't know. I don't want to talk about it a bunch, but all I really want to say about it is
Yeah.
that even though there is a lot of sex in the movie, it's not sexy. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, like, it never feels pornographic, weirdly. Even though there's a
See
ton
about
of
that.
sex in this movie, it never feels pornographic. It all feels
I'm
like
seeing
there's a
it.
very
Yeah.
purposeful addition to the
Hmm.
film. And
We're,
I
we're,
think it's,
we're-
yeah.
yeah. No, continue. Sorry. You go. You finish.
I think it's Jorgis's best film. I think it's him peak filmmaking. I mean, it's just him allowed to just be as wild and crazy as he wants to be. He uses a lot of different aspect ratios, a lot of different filmmaking techniques and camera techniques, some really great use of fisheye and a lot of great stuff. But probably my
Yeah,
favorite
we're
film of
gonna.
2023.
Okay. Yeah, we're gunning to see it this weekend for sure. I've seen like a lot of his movies, like pretty much most of them.
Yeah.
And I like them all, but he's like an example of a director whose movies I like, but I wouldn't say that he's like one of my favorite directors or anything
Mm,
like that. And
yeah.
so I'm very, very skeptical of this movie going into it. It's not like it's not that like he's like disappointed me multiple times, and so like I'm watching this movie. I'm about to go see. Like I said, gonna try to see it this weekend, hopefully. And it's not like he's like disappointing me to where I'm like, oh, I keep getting burned by him. So this movie I'm skeptical about. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think like I don't know. We'll see. I'll leave it at that. But yeah, I'm glad you liked it.
I think you'll like it. I mean,
We'll see.
having watched the movie, I think you're going to really enjoy the film. And
Okay.
it is particular, there's definitely a particular taste to this film, more so than I think his other work. And maybe it's too much, but I very much enjoyed the film. So,
Okay.
but let's jump into it. Top five
Yeah, let's just go.
films. Getting in number
Sort of.
five. You go first.
Okay. All right. We're hitting off on a good we're really setting the tone for the episode because so like I pay for like the letterbox, like I pay for like the low
The
tier, so that
premium.
means
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
like and what you get when you pay for it, what they do is that they take your diary information, your letterbox logs and all that shit, and they put it together like kind of like in a statistical thing for you, just to let you know like how many hours of movies you watched or what was
Yeah.
your highest rated or most watched or whatever. And so coming in at number 5 that I want to talk about is my most watched director of this year, the most films that I watched by a single director was 14 films with Woody Allen. I watched 14 of Woody Allen's movies this year. And you know, uh I think if I had to pick one that I really, really loved, that I think was maybe the best one that I've seen so far, and 14 is like a small percentage of his movies.
He's made so many
Um,
movies.
I would say Hannah and Her Sisters might be the best one. I think that was the
Okay.
last one that I watched too. I really like Hannah and Her Sisters because I think it's a good balance of everything that Woody Allen has did at that point.
Yeah.
Comedy, drama, like familial drama. He's in the movie, but he's not in it the whole time. He's not like the
Hmm.
main character, I would say, but he has a really good um his story is really funny and he's really good in it. And I don't know, that's just I find that movie has like a really good balance. But yeah, I watch like 14 of his movies and some are better than others. His slapstick stuff is a little well, his like early movies are a little annoying. They're
Hmm.
okay. They're funny. Um, and yeah, I just appreciate the his his perspective for the most part. Um, and he just has like a really weird, interesting career. Um, and I don't know if I would I don't know. It's kind of hard to say if I would say whether or not he's one of my favorite filmmakers. Um, because I definitely when I watch his movies, I'm very discerning. But I don't know when you're in it, like you're in it, like in Hannah and Her Sisters, you're just like, yeah, I'm in like New York City, like in the 80s, and I'm hanging out with
Yeah.
his family and they're doing all this stuff, you know what I mean? You kind of like, I kind of can't help but like live vicariously through the movies. Um, and yeah, I can't help it, it's just, that's number five, Woody Allen.
Wow. I remember when you're on that Woody Allen train for like 3 weeks in a row in the after show. We talked about Woody Allen. So I would say in some ways I'm surprised, but in other ways I'm not, just because his films are so accessible, they're so easy to find. And so I'm sure that also played a role into it. And he just has so many films. I mean, how many films does this
He
guy? He
he
has
has a lot
like
of different kinds of
40 or
movies, I
50
would say
films.
too. They all kind of
That
like do
too.
different things. They all kind of, and he, you know, he just has all kinds of different movies from different time periods. Sometimes he's in his movies, sometimes he's not. Sometimes his movies are more serious than others. Again, I like Hannah and Her Sisters because I just like how balanced that one is.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah. And his films can be very digestible. I think they're overall, not always, but I
they're always
think they
really
can be very
short.
easy watch. They're short, easy
Yeah.
watches. They're all around like 90 minutes, so it never feels like you're kind of gutted the way that
Hmm.
when you watch some films, you're like, Jesus, I just need a break. So his films, even like his darker, more dramatic ones, they feel sort of almost like
Yeah.
an appetizer, as it were. It never feels too filling. And that's not sort of any diss on Woody Allen films. I, of course, love some Woody Allen films. One of Woody Allen's films, which of course, talked for the podcast way back when a very early podcast was Stardust Memories, which I think is still my favorite of his films, but still. All right.
Yeah.
So coming in at my number five is the very first film I watched when we had the very short-lived movie theater
Hmm.
way back in January. One of the first films we watched this year, a film we watched for the podcast. I'd never seen any of this man's work before. The first Indian film we watched for the podcast,
Oh yeah.
known as the Orson Welles of India, arguably one of not only the greatest films I saw this year, but probably will live down in for me as one of my favorite films of all time. It's probably going to go on the top 100 list, at least for me, and that is Pyaasa. Just an absolutely beautiful, gorgeous, amazing film. I love the songs. The songs still get stuck in my head, even though I haven't seen this movie in almost 12 months. The cinematography in black and white just looks absolutely gorgeous. The story still haunts me to this day. I think about those performances all of the time. And I think that's really what separates this movie from so many movies I watched this year. I mean, between the two of us, we probably watch over 500 films a year. We watch a lot
Maybe,
of
yeah.
movies. Right? I mean, how many movies did you end up watching this year?
300.
300, and I watched just about 200, so almost exactly at 500. So we're two people that watch a
Mhm.
lot of movies. And so for a movie, particular movie I saw almost a year ago, to still be so prevalent in my memory. I mean, I can still sit here and think about very specific moments, like that moment where he's standing through the gate and he's trying to get his friend to get him out.
Mhm.
Moments like that, like they still stick in my memory, just speak to how wonderful this film is. I mean, there's so many films I saw this year that I really enjoyed the experience while I watched them. But if you asked me a single thing about the movie, or even if you told me that I watched the movie this year, I may be a little surprised because there's just so many movies, right, that we consume in a year. And so for this one to stick with me as it did and still does, I think will continue to. And I made a promise after I watched the film that I'd go watch more of his stuff, and I still haven't fulfilled that promise yet. But it's someone's
You're
work
long.
that,
You're a
yeah,
little
that's
hungry.
part of it. It's very intimidating. He makes like 3+
Yeah.
hour films, and just like Piazza, like those are that was a really intense experience, right? We talk about the Woody Allen's being like an appetizer, this very like
Yeah, it's like way
just easy
different.
experience.
Hmm.
Films like Piazza, like that takes everything out of you. Like you watch that movie and you're like, oh, like I'm
And you
just
gotta like not look
exhausted
at your
from the
phone.
experience.
You gotta
Yeah.
like you really gotta like think
You got to
about
be
it.
there. You really got
Yeah,
to
you
be
gotta be
present
there.
for those kind of films.
Uh-huh.
Not that they're not enjoyable. And I think that's the other thing about it is even though this is a 3+ hour film, which I believe looking at my list, there's only one other film that's that long. Most of the films on my list are short films because I'm a big shorter films because I'm a big fan of 90-ish minutes film. But this may be the longest on my list, except for one other. But even though it's as long as it is, it feels very quick. It moves very fast. So and
Yeah.
Piazza, I'm gonna be honest, it was on the fence. Like there was one other film, American Friend, which was like almost at number five. It was like right
Uh-huh.
there between American Friend and Piazza. But I just think Piazza is just at the end
American
of the day,
Friend's
like it's a
awesome.
lot more gut wrenching the way
Yeah.
than American Friend is. So number five is Piazza.
Okay. Yeah, I love that movie too. That was a great movie. I definitely need to watch more of those as well. You know. Yeah, number four. Number four is the second director whose movies I watched the most this year. Earlier this year. And I'm disappointed with myself that I didn't stick with watching the other movies in the collection that they put on Criterion.
Yeah.
But perhaps I'll get it back around to it. Um, that was the films of Hal Hartley,
Oh, okay.
um, who I just was really kind of I think if I had to pick one movie, fuck. Hmm, I guess I would have to pick Trust. I think I'm gonna have to go with the movie Trust. I really like Trust. It's a beautiful film. That early Hal Hartley kind of style and story is really wonderful. I really like Adrian Shelley, really like Martin Donovan. They're really, really good in the movie together. It it's funny. The Hal Hartley directing style is definitely a unique one that I really appreciate. And I appreciate the fact that like his movies are basically they're like independent films with like a capital I. He retains the
Mhm.
ownership of all of his movies. And they have like a style, a style and a mindset that is incredibly independent. And and some people might watch like a Hal Hartley movie and feel that they are like they're bullshit or that they are pretentious, and that's
Mhm.
okay. But for me, I don't necessarily want to watch every single movie. Anytime I watch a movie, I don't necessarily want people to talk like regular people every single movie that I watch, right?
Mhm.
I would like movies to experiment with the idea of like conversations and talking and dialogue and shit like that.
Yeah.
And I think Hal Hartley definitely does that. And I think he's a good writer, and I think he's a great director, and his movies are impactful, they're beautiful, they and I'm really glad that they put them on Criterion because they're not necessarily like common films. Um and yeah, I just that's really all I have to say about it. I just think that, they just go so hard. They're just so and again, I really need to watch his other ones. Um yeah. He's I love him. He's lovely.
Yeah, I know he's someone we've talked a bit on the after show about before. Someone whose work I haven't seen any of. Yep, according to Letterboxd, I haven't seen any of his films. I know we talked about Trust. We might have talked about a couple of other of his films, but
I watched 10 of his films this year.
that's
And
wild.
that includes short films though too. I watched
Oh,
some of his
okay.
shorts. They're not all features.
Okay. Because this
Actually,
guy,
I lied. He's the third most watched guy that I've watched this year.
who's
But
number
yeah,
two?
well, I'll talk about him later.
Oh, okay. He's on the list. Okay.
Yeah.
If I got the Letterbox premium now, would it give me my stats for this last year?
Yeah, it'll tell you the
I wonder
stats
if
of
it,
like every year and
okay.
also do like an all-time one too.
Is it worth it?
Yeah. It's like 10 or $20 a year. You also
Oh, really?
don't get ads on the phone, on the app. Like ads aren't on the app.
Oh, that's
I'm trying to think
nice.
what else it has. I don't know. I
Yeah,
use
it's
the app every
yeah.
single. I don't usually like pay for like apps or anything like that, or like
Yeah.
subscriptions for websites or anything like that. I really don't care about it. But Letterbox, that's an app that I use every single day, and so I thought it was worth it for me.
I guess it's only $20 a year. I think I might get it. At least so I can see my
Okay.
stats. I'm
Yeah,
gonna
it's
do it.
nice.
Okay. Well, I don't have anything to say about How Heart Leaks. I haven't seen any of his films, but we've talked
That's
about
fine.
him before.
You
So
go.
still someone that's on the list.
You go next.
So on number four is a film we watched pretty recently, and I was worried that recency bias would play a bit of a role in this, and I think it's always going to. There's not really a way around it, but I don't know. I think it's very deserving of where it is. And looking at my list, sometimes I wonder, if I hadn't seen the films I saw this year, in another year, right? In another universe, I think this would have been number one on my list. But this was a year that I saw so many amazing films. I mean, I think of like my last couple of years, like I go on the Letterboxd and look at my top five or top 10
Mhm.
were for other years. And this year was just like a year of seeing some of my favorite films of all time. So it's been a really great year for me for cinema. I just got really lucky. Probably the best year of cinema for me since probably 2017, 2018, when I really first got into movies. So really great year. But at number four for me is Still Walking, which was
Yeah.
just absolutely amazing. I mean, truly a modern Ozu in a lot of different ways, just in the way
Hmm.
that he makes films and the conversations that they have, and this way of everything happening at once, but nothing happening at all. The way of telling stories through dialogue and actions, and the way we're always talking around things, which is something I always encourage my students to do as creative writers, is one of the things that they really struggle with is whenever they write a line of dialogue, whenever they have people talking in either a film that they write or a short story or a novel or whatever it is that they're working on, is they always want their characters to say exactly what they want. And I mean, at the end of the day, right, it's all about what do characters want, what do characters not wants and needs and desires and all of that. But the challenging thing about telling a great story is you have to say everything without saying anything at all. And I think of all the films on my list, I think this is the best written film on the list. I think its ability to talk about things without talking about anything, the way that they're constantly in argument, constantly
Hmm.
in confrontation with each other, and just very beautiful. I mean, some incredible editing here, really holding on shots for a very long time and just allowing the entire scene to sort of move instead of this thing where we do the classic, shot, reverse shot. That would be so easy to ruin a movie like this. I think in the hands of an inept director, this could be a very bad film. And so I think that also speaks to just how incredible our director is here, their ability to really be patient and sit with an entire scene, right? And this is something that, when I speak of Ozu S, is something Ozu was famous for, is he would, instead of shooting a single person, he would often shoot the entire family all in one room, and you would
Yeah.
just watch things develop. And instead of utilizing the camera for movement, you would utilize our characters for movement. So as the characters sort of move around, that's sort of the movement that we
Right.
get. That's sort of the action of the scene that creates the mise en scène, which is sort of this reverse way of thinking about mise en scène stuff, thinking about, hey, we put the camera here and then this happens. It's thinking about, okay, let's worry less about the camera and more about how our people move within it, almost play-esque and yet simultaneously uh, beautiful and haunting. And it really makes you think about, especially that scene where she's trying to catch the butterfly because she thinks it's, or the moth.
Mhm.
I can't remember if it's a moth or a butterfly. I think it's a butterfly.
Yeah, it's a bug.
It's a
Yeah.
bug of some kind, right? Just trying to catch because she thinks it's her lost son, and just all these ways that we
Hmm.
as humans are affected by loss and the trauma that comes with it, and all these different ways that we try to deal with it and fail to deal with it in a lot of different ways, and just how we see death. And thinking about this too, because I was making this list while visiting both my parents and
Hmm.
Emily's parents. So, this is the first time that we've seen both parents in a long time.
Hmm.
And while on this trip, uh, Chuck actually just got a job here in Reno. So
Mm.
him and Chili are actually gonna be
Wow.
moving out here to Reno, which
Oh, I
is
didn't know
very
that.
exciting. Yeah,
Great.
we just learned about it a couple of days ago. So
Great.
I was thinking a lot about
Mhm.
family, right? And sort of the ways that your parents kind of drive you absolutely insane, right? I mean, I love my
Yeah.
mom to the ends of the earth, but like spending 5 minutes with her feels like an eternity sometimes. But it's also, some of the best 5 minutes of my life. So it's kind of this back and forth that we have with our family members that is completely unique. And I don't think it's really like any other relationship in the world because I don't know, like you always want to be around them, but then like whenever you're around them, you also want to like leave immediately because they drive you insane. But it's that sort of
Yeah.
insane that it's almost addictive in a certain way. So thinking about parents, and of course, I'm lucky enough, and you're lucky enough, and Emily's lucky enough that none of our parents are very old by any means. My parents are only in their 50s. My mom's 51 and Jimmy's only 48-ish, and Shelly's not 50 yet either, and Chuck's only like 52, 53. So they're still, relatively young, especially sort of in the modern age, but sort of thinking about they're kind of on to the next stage of their life, right? They're starting to think about retirement and what life will look like post having a
Hmm.
job, and thinking about them getting older, and the sort of reversal of care that's kind of getting closer, right? All our lives, our parents have been taking care of us, and obviously it hasn't happened yet, but you're starting to see like, oh, like in the next 10 to 15 years, right? It's now going to be us taking care of them, making sure that they're okay and that sort of thing. And so sort of watching this circle of life happen in real time, especially when you only see your parents once every 6 months. Of course, luckily we'll get to
Hmm.
see Chuck and Shelly a lot more, which I'm very excited about.
Yeah.
But I think the best way that I'm reminded about like the aging of my parents is my little sister, right? She's about to turn
Yeah.
7 years old. So like I only see her every 6 months. And
Hmm.
a 6 year old, right? They age a lot in 6 months, like just the difference. And it's it's challenging, I think, seeing her because like I don't get to see her very often.
Hmm.
And even though like I talk to her on the phone every day, so I see her like on FaceTime and stuff, but like especially like when I was there for the first couple of years, and now like you only see her every 6 months, it's a very surreal experience because it's kind of like the meshing of reality versus like this, I don't know, esoteric phone style, like in a different universe sort of thing. I mean, like you're talking to
Hmm.
them, but you're not like really there. So
Yeah.
it's really interesting, and I think that's part of the reason that's on the list. Is it's just a film that really makes me think about what it means to be a son, what it means to be a father or a mother or a sibling, and sort of how all those relationships you kind of are all of those things at once, and then you're also none of those things. And then the way we sort of create these facades when we're in front of our family, right? We tell our family that we're living this life or that life, and we put on this mask of who we are, which is true wherever we go, right? We're always putting on a mask of who we are. In this case with our parents, it's a very specific thing. So I've been thinking a lot about that lately, but truly, like I said, in another universe, this would have been my favorite film of the year, but still an incredible film. I mean, I think well deserving of its fourth position.
I agree. It's a great movie. Good. Okay. All right. Um, yeah, number three going into it. Second most viewed director this year at 11 films. Uh, although this director, even though I've watched 11 of his films,
Hmm.
if you add up the amount of like hours compared to like Woody Allen, I've watched more, right, of
Yeah.
his stuff. Like if you add up the amount of hours,
Right.
Letterboxd doesn't have that feature, so I don't really know how much is that is. And I actually just watched a movie by him recently, quite recently, which was also great. That was, of course, the great. And this movie's probably this guy's probably on your list too. The great
Mhm.
Frederick Wiseman.
Oh, of
I got
course.
into his
Yep.
movies. Is he on your list?
He is. He's actually
Oh,
he's my
okay.
number three too.
Okay, good. Okay, good. All right. That's a good coincidence then, since we can just kind of like talk about him at the same time then.
Yep.
Yeah. I watched we of course watched Monrovia, Indiana for the show, which was great. But I think
Mhm.
if I had to pick like one movie by him to at least like kind of hone in on or like, suggest people like watch first, it would probably be Ex Libris, his
Mhm.
film on the New York Public Library. That was the first movie I watched by him. And I just love it. I love Ex Libris. It's so all encompassing of the subject of the New York Public Library. It does it perfectly. It's perfectly edited. It has everything in it. It's satisfying to watch. It can be frustrating. It can be beautiful. I like his more like New York centric movies. So I love Ex Libris. I also love Central Park, which of course is his movie about Central Park.
Yeah.
He made Central Park in 1989. So it's like 1987, 88 Central Park. So it's amazing. And then in Jackson Heights, his movie on Jackson Heights is also amazing that he did a few years
Mhm.
ago. He did one called Hospital, which was in a hospital in I think New York City.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I just and the most recent one I watched was The Store,
Okay.
which is a movie that he made filming the Neiman Marcus store in Dallas, Texas during around Christmas time. They put it on Lay Cinema
Very
Club.
cool.
So I
Yeah.
went ahead and watched it. And yeah, it's like 82, 81, like department store footage, and it's so good. And I just love it, man. Like he's got a new one coming out soon. We're gonna see it at the Speed next month, so I'm really excited to see
Oh,
that.
cool.
4 hours long.
What's
And
the
yeah,
new one
I
about?
just
Sorry.
um it
Yeah.
it's about a restaurant called well, it's about a family called the Trois family,
Hmm.
and they have three restaurants in central France, and they're like three Michelin
Oh
star
wow.
restaurants in
Okay.
France. So it's like about, I'm guessing, the day-to-day activities of these restaurants.
Right.
Sounds spectacular. And yeah, I just love his movies, man. Like they're just so much fun to watch. They're really long, but they are unbelievably satisfying, and they say so much.
Hmm.
And he just kind of like lets the footage speak for itself about these things that I think are really important, and say and I don't know, like I just like watched one, and then I watched another, and I'm like, I gotta watch another. I just they're kind of like addicting in a way. And yeah,
Yeah.
it just they're just so much fun.
Ugh, love Weissman. And of course, my number three is Monrovia, Indiana, which partly because I haven't seen any of his other films as of yet, although I'm definitely going to go see that new one and going to try to watch more of his work, but also just because as a Hoosier born and raised, there is something very personal about this film and what it means to grow up in the Midwest and sort of in a not as a town as small as Monrovia, but certainly not, a big city. So kind of being in that sort of middle ground between and watching a town grow or die, especially like my grandparents, they live in Clinton, Indiana, and that's certainly a town that is very much like Monrovia because it's a farming town that sort of had its rise in like the 60s and 70s and was sort of this booming place, and now it's sort of this place where like
Hmm.
there's nothing there, right? No one lives there anymore. It's just full of old people because no one's moving there. And so it's like the town itself is dying. And it's a fascinating study of of what it means to sort of be a citizen of the United States and a community. And then also too, I've recently been rereading some of David Foster Wallace's stuff because I don't reread a lot of books, and we don't really talk about books a lot in here. Although, between the two of us, we read a ton of books a year too, along with all the movies that we watch. But I've noticed that the one author that I seem to be able to read over and over again is David Foster Wallace. And I'm currently reading this collection of essays about tennis. It's called On Tennis, which is basically all the essays that he did about tennis. And he was sort of a tennis sensation way back in the
Yeah, he was good
1970s. He
at
was
it.
like one of the top.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's very good. He's like 17th in like the Midwest. And Midwest is very competitive for tennis. So he was a very good tennis player. He was never like great, right? He was never pro or anything like that, but he's
Right.
someone who had a lifelong love for tennis. And I like to compare David Foster Wallace to Wiseman in the way that they capture sort of reality. Like, right, they both have this way of sort of seeing the world and sort of exposing it without putting their own bias towards it. I mean, obviously, like we all have our bias, and Wiseman's looking at the world in this very specific way. But it's more of like I don't think there is any other filmmaker, and I think this is why Wiseman's one of the greatest documentarians of all time, and arguably one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, is there is no one who can capture a world better than Wiseman. Like the way he is able to capture what Monrovia, Indiana is without any talking heads, right? Without any
Like
questions being
nothing.
asked.
Yeah,
Nothing, right?
nothing going on.
It's just images and people talking. Like that's all it is,
Yeah.
just through editing alone, which is I think how all documentaries should be made, although it's arguably almost impossible to make a documentary that way because it's just so goddamn
It's not
challenging.
because like I like a Wiseman documentary. If you play it for someone, I mean, it's just too slow for some people. And like
Oh
the
yeah.
thing about Wiseman too is that like as you get into the 2010s and digital photography becomes a thing, he doesn't he'll just like film and
He
film
doesn't
and
care.
film. He does
Yeah.
because he doesn't have to worry about the cost of film. So he'll put scenes in the movie of a guy talking, especially there's a scene in Jackson Heights where a guy talks. It's like a 10-15 minute long scene of a guy talking. And that's it.
Yeah.
It's like and people like, even with documentaries, feature films, whatever, they don't people like I think some people just wouldn't be able to stand that. Like it's just too uh I think people like are just like, well, what's the point? It's like, well,
Yeah.
that's the point.
Yeah, I definitely understand how that might not be everybody's cup of tea. And I know if Emily, well, she watched part of it with me and she immediately fell asleep. So I understand that this type of filmmaking isn't for everybody, and I respect that, but it is definitely my type of filmmaking. It's the type of
Yeah, me too.
filmmaking, honestly, that I aspire to. Like as a filmmaker, that's kind of like that's peak filmmaking to me. Like that's the kind of films I would love to make, are films like that, films that are sort of not documentaries in the traditional sense, right? It's not just people sitting around talking, but it's storytelling through images, and they're about real people and real lives, and it's something that I try to recreate in the stories that I tell and the writing that we do and the stuff that we do. But I mean, can anyone do it like Wiseman? Of course not. But oh my
He's
God,
90 something. He's
that's
90
crazy.
something.
I hope this man never dies. I
Yeah.
hope he lives forever. That's gonna be a sad day. 'Cause my God, there's no one like him. Truly. All right. Number two. What do you got, Andrew?
Yeah, I'll just yeah go into number two, and this is kind of cheating just because like it's sort of about a singular direct filmmaker that you and I like a lot, but it's really about one thing in particular, like one film in particular, I should say,
Hmm.
and it's not really a film, it's more something else, it's more of like a TV show you could say, but it
Oh,
doesn't matter, we were able to finally watch all of Twin Peaks earlier
okay.
this year, um. And, so technically not a movie, but it doesn't really matter. Um, you know, I guess there is the movie in, Fire Walk with Me, which I think is
Sure.
like that's like one of the greatest movies ever made. Like that is really like one of the greatest films of all time. Like
Mm,
I think about that movie a lot. I think about Twin Peaks in general a lot. Um, I attempted to watch. I think I watched the first season of Twin Peaks many, many times, and I just couldn't
yes.
get. I for some reason I don't know. It's not even the beginning of the season two is bad. I just fell out of it. But we finally buckled down. We watched all of it. Season two has some amazing episodes. The last episode's amazing.
Oh yeah.
And then we watched the movie, which, like I said, is amazing. And then, of course, we watched The Return, which is one of the greatest things ever created. Like it's perfect.
It is.
And I love the show. I could go on and on about the show. I'm not going to go on too much about it. By the show, I mean like I include Firewalk with Me, just the whole gamut, the whole Twin Peaks
It's one thing.
saga.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole thing. Um, and it's got everything, man. It just has it all. And I just, and to me, like you know, I think about Twin Peaks 2 in relation to like the history of television and my interest in television. I don't really like TV shows at all. Um, you know, like 100, like 20 new television shows come out every single year. And for me, I just think like The Return is like the end all be all of like the television format. Not
Mm.
to say that like no new TV shows that come out are always going to be
Good ever again.
bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't really think that. But like The Return, it just kind of it just sort of it just says like a lot about like again like the history of television, how it makes us feel, our expectations of it, kind of like our expectations of what like a Twin Peaks like revival would look or feel like. Um, it's of course it's really funny. The whole show is really funny. And again, as we've talked about with Lynch, he's like the only filmmaker in my opinion that really instills like a sense of dread and horror in me.
Yeah.
And just like pure evil, pure just darkness and destruction. I can't think of anyone else that really like makes me feel that way. And again, Twin Peaks, one of the greatest things ever made. It just pretty much like ruined television for me. Like I just don't really, and I just don't, when I was like in high school, I would watch so many television episodes. I would like just watch one after another, so many different TV shows. But I can't stand it now. I just think it's such a waste of time and it's so brain melting.
Numbing. Mm.
Um, and you know, but yeah, Twin Peaks again, I think about it a lot and that's saying a lot. I don't really I don't know. I talk about it too with my partner all the time. We're always talking about like Twin Peaks too. We're always bringing it up just because like, oh my God, remember that part from it, it's just it just doesn't, the character of Laura Palmer, that's an amazing character. Even though she dies,
In the
her like
first episode.
character, yeah, but she's great in the movie. That actor who plays Laura Palmer is unbelievable in that movie. But
Yeah.
yeah. But anyway, like I love it. It's just and I know you love it too, so I mean like that's no, you're obviously not you're very aware of its quality. But yeah, that's number two.
Oh yeah. Twin Peaks, I think, is the only TV show I've seen in full more than once. There's a couple of TV shows I've seen like bits and pieces,
Yeah,
but
you ought to. People ought to do that. I'm
it,
gonna
it's
do that.
honestly it's honestly like one of those TV shows that you could watch once a year, every year for the rest of your life, and still find something new in it because it's just that much better. And I'd say, you know what? I'd say The Return, it was written as a movie, it was directed as a movie. I'd say The Return is
Might
a
as well be,
movie.
yeah.
It might as well be, right? Because it was produced as a movie. They showed it at MoMA as one long movie. So even though it's
Yeah.
like altogether, what,
It's
like
like the
eight or
best
nine
movie of
hours,
the 21st century. Like, yeah.
it's honestly it's one of the great movies of the 21st century, and I think it should be considered a feature film because even though it's cut into pieces, the kind of how it's cut is sort of arbitrary, and I think it is one long piece that deserves to be consumed. Gosh, I love David Lynch so much, and I'm surprised the David
Yeah.
Lynch film didn't make it on here because I did see a couple of new David Lynch films, but again, this year was just so packed. with incredible
Yeah.
films that it just wouldn't make it. Although I was thinking about rewatching Twin Peaks again, and I was gonna tell you in the after show, but I'll just swing in here quick. Have you seen the TV show Moonlighting?
No.
I think you'll like it. Bruce
I'm not
Willis,
gonna watch
early
it, but I
1980s.
appreciate you attempting to uh
Convert you.
yeah,
I
trying to
think
get me a
it's up your alley. They're like hour-long episodes. They're only like 6 episodes a season. It's basically a mini. It's weird. It's like a 1980s mini series. Like it's really high production, really well written. Probably it's gonna go down as one of my favorite TV shows of all time. Honestly, it's that good.
oh, it's
So
an old show. I didn't realize
yeah,
this.
it's not new.
Interesting.
Nope, 1980s.
Okay.
Young Bruce
Oh,
Willis. This is like what made Bruce Willis.
oh, the Bruce Willis Sybil Shepherd show.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually earlier this year I tried to watch Miami Vice, and Miami
Okay.
Vice, like the pilot, is amazing, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, and people
Okay.
love the pilot. Like that is in itself like an amazing movie, and I recommend
Hmm.
seeing the pilot. Like it's got immaculate vibes. But then like I was like, oh, let's keep watching it, and I get into the second episode, I'm just like, it doesn't feel the same. It didn't pull me in.
Yeah.
So I don't know. The moonlighting thing is interesting. This type of TV is kind of um uh it definitely is alluring to me. So I'll think about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I think you'll
Um
like it. I think sometime next year, especially like the
Maybe.
first episode's like an hour and a half. Like the first episode's a movie. And
Right, like
it's
same
a,
with the Miami Vice pilot.
yeah. And it's a great pilot, but honestly, it gets better. Like there's this
Okay.
episode, like it's like the fourth or fifth episode of the first season, and they're on a train. It's like a Agatha Christie. Oh my God, the show is so
Yeah.
well written. I mean, it is incredibly well written.
And
And
yeah. Huh.
I guess I just didn't know like shows like this existed back in the 1980s because
Yeah.
it's like film quality, like high production, right? A lot of money and time is put into this show,
It's
and
just
they're
like when they
very
produce a
short
TV show
seasons.
nowadays, it's like, all right, let's grab the digital camera and let's film it and like now. Like it's like
Yeah,
I don't know, like it just
exactly.
everything just looks the same to me. Even like The Bear, I started watching that show earlier this year, and I'm
Mhm.
just like, I don't know. Like I know it's good, like it isn't bad. I can see the appeal. I can see the architecture in front of me. Like I understand like why
Sure.
it's good and like why people like it. But it's like I don't want to watch like multiple seasons of this. I don't really care all that much.
Yeah. So something to look into. I think you'll like
Right.
it. But
Okay, yeah, I
co
feel that.
coming in at number two for me, I actually just rewatched School of Rock, which isn't the film, but uh, same director, Linklater, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
Linklater,
yeah.
Richard Linklater.
Richard Linklater. I forgot how amazing School of Rock is, by the way. Like I rewatched it for the first time in like
Yeah, it's
so many
funny.
years because they're
It's pretty
playing on
good.
Christmas. I was like, oh, this is like a really high quality like film. Because I always thought it was like a children's film because I saw it when I was a kid and there's like a lot of kids in
I
it
think
and it was
kids.
like
I
on
think
like
kids. I think
I think
no.
kids
I
like
think
it. I mean,
no
I liked
kids.
it when I was a
It's a good
kid.
kid. It's a good kid movie. But it's also like I think adults like it too. That's a good
Yeah.
example of a good kid adult movie.
But anyways, this is the very first performance by the Matthew McConaughey. It's how he got into acting. Dazed and Confused. One
That's
of
crazy to me that like you didn't watch this movie until earlier this year. Like that's a
right?
movie I've watched like I watched a movie maybe around a dozen times in different. Um,
And it deserves it.
yeah, it's not like one of my favorite movies of all time, but like then again, I have watched it many, many times because I don't know, it just has a good its tone. I just really like the tone. I like hanging out.
His again, talking about like films that are easily digestible. It's like one of those movies that you can just have on like at any time. Like I could watch this
Yeah,
movie 100
definitely.
times and still it's like those movies you watch on Christmas every year, right? And you watch them every year
Sure.
because like they're just that good or like they bring back some sort of like tone or memory. And that's like how it is with Dazed and Confused. It's like it captures a specific moment in time so well for me. And it just captures everything that I was feeling in a specific moment. And it's just so well written and so many incredible characters and a million different stories going on all at once. And I did consider this for number one, but honestly, my number one is so far above everything else that I don't think anything could have been at my number one. So Dazed and Confused, very strong. number two. Just a beautiful, wonderful. Talking about well-written films. I mean, my God, almost all my films on here. I think I've been very interested in writing this year, screenwriting, dialogue, just the way we tell stories. Something, perhaps it's because I've been teaching English this year, so something I've been very interested in lately. But an incredible study in how we talk to each other and how we tell stories through dialogue. And when a movie like Dazed and Confused, where really there's not a whole lot of plot going on, and that's true with a lot of Linklater's work, right? It's a lot of just people walking around talking, and yet it works perfectly. It works in a way that nothing else ever can, and I'm very excited to watch Dazed and Confused many more times.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm just more partial to the Before trilogy. But yeah, Dazed and Confused is a
Sure.
much different movie. It's like
Yeah.
it's a stoner comedy hangout film, big
Hmm.
cast. Um, it's lovely. He has another movie out called Everybody Wants Some that came out like 7 years ago, and I think it's like a similar thing, except I think it's like in the 80s or something like that. So maybe you
Okay.
like that one, but I haven't seen it yet. I
Yeah.
don't know anything about it, but I think apparently it's good. But yeah. Anyway, um, all right. Before I get to number one, I'm gonna quickly run down just like, honorable mention or whatever the fuck. You're free to do that
Good.
too right after me, but whatever. Um, got to give a big shout out to Paul Schrader. You know,
Of
I love
course.
Paul Schrader. Watched a bunch of his movies this year. Earlier this year, I saw his movie Master Gardener in the theater. That's a 2022 movie, so it doesn't really, it doesn't really
Yeah.
like it's not a 2023 movie technically, even though I saw it in the theaters earlier this year. Love that movie. Saw some of his other movies for the first time. American Gigolo, hardcore, amazing.
Yeah.
William Friedkin died earlier this year.
Of
We
course.
watched Sorcerer for the show, which I think is a perfect film. And I watched a bunch of his other movies too, and they're amazing. So William Friedkin's awesome. Um, Matt Farley. I watched a bunch of his Matt Farley movies this year. Um,
Yeah.
I love Matt Farley. And I talked to him on the phone, and he was great to talk on the phone. I had a good time talking to him
Yeah.
on the phone.
And
I
we
think I
talked
told you
about
about
this.
that.
Crazy. Yeah. Oh, you
Yeah.
just certainly
So
did.
yeah, yeah. So and he's got a couple new movies coming out soon. And I just think his movies are hilarious. I think and they're gentle, they're sweet, and they just have like, and they're definitely smart. Like they're smart, intelligent movies. So love Matt Farley. Abel Ferrara, watched a bunch of his movies this year. Rewatched some, watched some new ones. I watched his movie New Rose Hotel, which is a movie that was written by William Gibson. And that movie's awesome. Loved it. Kick-ass film. Um, um, a really cool theater experience was when we went to see the Apocalypse. I think the Teen Apocalypse trilogy with Greg Araki.
Hmm.
Over across 2 days. We watched all three of those movies. That was a really great theater experience, really fun. Um, and I guess like some spare movies, Michael Clayton, love that movie. I watched it earlier this year, and I don't know. I think about the movie a lot. It's great. And Man Escaped is another movie I'll throw out there too. There are
Sure.
probably other movies that I even liked more than those two, but those I was just kind of like on Letterboxd and I was just scrolling through my shit and I was just like, those are good to mention. But I don't know if you want to talk about my honorable mentions or if you just want me
Yeah.
to go into my number one.
No,
Yeah,
I'll jump in with some
yeah,
honorable
yeah,
mentions.
you go, yeah.
So I don't have a ton of honorable mentions, mostly because I already talked about most of my honorable mentions films
Yeah.
like uh, Dream Scenario and American Friend, and of course, just so many incredible films that we watched for the podcast this year. I think it was a great year for the podcast. I think we watched a lot of really great films this year. But I think the one thing that I want to mention isn't a movie, but rather a franchise, and I'd arguably one of the greatest franchises of all time, which is the Mission Impossible franchise, which I saw for the first time. I
Yeah.
saw all the movies.
I finished them all this year too. Yeah.
So it was a great, satisfying thing to watch
That's
all
a
those
fun one.
movies. And, I think they all are good in their own way. I think some of them are definitely better than others. I think my least favorite one is certainly the one directed by
The third
J.J.
one.
Abrams, the third
Yeah.
one, which I think Philip Seymour Hoffman's great in that. And I think there's some great things about it, but
Yeah,
I had
even
some
that
serious
movie's
problems with
okay.
it. But like, there's no bad Mission Impossible, which is insane. Like, they've made like what, like
Yeah.
eight of these now, and there's not a single bad one. Like, they're all good.
Yeah, I
They're
would
all
say. Yeah.
enjoyable. They're all insanely fantastic. Great stunts throughout all of them. Tom Cruise, honestly, like every time he comes, he's never phoning it in, even though like he could easily, but he never does. No one really does. It's one of the great franchises. And then, of course, the other franchise that I watched this year was the Daniel Craig James Bond movies, which I think is a little more hit or miss. Definitely not as stable as the Mission Impossible franchise, but the very first Daniel Craig James Bond movie, Casino Royale, I think is his
Yeah,
first
that
one.
that movie's awesome.
That's
Kick
probably one of
ass.
the best James Bond movies of all time. I've seen a lot of James Bond movies, and there are very few films that just are even close to that one. I mean, he's just an absolute insane person,
Yeah, it's great.
and it's truly wonderful. So I just wanted to give a shout out to those two franchises. So Andrew, you get into
Yeah.
your number one film,
Number
2023.
one sort of film. Yeah. So yeah, like number one, and this kind of goes into like what I think was the best movie we watched, at least in terms of like first watches for me, was Nashville by Robert Altman.
Oh,
That was
okay.
easily the best movie we watched this year. And I think too, also it goes after we watched Nashville, I also watched Shortcuts, which is
Hmm.
basically LA 90s Nashville.
Nashville, yeah,
Nashville is like a 70s movie, but so I think like both of them go together very well. And yeah, I love the Robert Altman style. It kind of goes in kind of tandem with like Dazed and Confused a little bit.
for sure.
A little bit. I would say that Nashville definitely has crazier shit going on, but it has like a really big ensemble cast. Um, I love the use of music. I love the use of just the location of Nashville. I love all
Mhm.
the different characters and their interactions. I love it as the movie unfolds, you're revealed more and more of how like characters are related and how they know each other. Um, they do this in shortcuts as well, which is really satisfying and fun to watch. And I just love like the dialogue Altman style where everybody's like talking over one another. It's so
Yeah,
much fun to watch. Um, and Nashville is just it's just one of those movies, right, where it's just a great American film about America. It is so um it just says it all, and I think just I think it's of course it's really funny. It's extremely funny. It's very sad. And again, it's just kind of like a movie that was made for me. It's like Southern United States, movie about musicians and the music business, politics, journalism, containing some of the best actors of that time period, killing it. I love when Elliot Gould shows up as himself. That's a great moment.
yeah.
Um, and I just really just that's just once again a good example. And I think I talked about this in review. It's a good example of a movie that that is just like it's kind of crazy the fact that it like was able to work out the way that it did because it just looks so complicated and there's so many moving parts and people and things going on that it's kind of crazy that Altman and the same thing with Shortcuts. It's crazy that Altman was able to like pull it all together into a coherent thing that to me just I don't know, it's just kind of it does it all. So yeah, Altman, best movie we watched on the podcast. Definitely won't, you know, maybe the best movie I watched all year in terms of first
Hmm.
watches. Just fantastic.
Wow. Yeah, I guess I'm a little surprised. I wouldn't say I'm that surprised because when we talked about Nashville, uh, a lot of congratulatory, and it is a great film. But I'm surprised Nashville didn't even make my list. It didn't even make a top five. It possibly would make a top 10, but my number one is, which I'm surprised it didn't make your list, to be honest, because I think this isn't just the best film I've seen this year, but this may be one of my favorite films of all time. Easily my favorite film by this director, and kind of put this director in a different light to me because his other stuff, like, I liked, but like I didn't really get the appeal. I didn't understand why everyone loved this director so much until I saw this film and I was like, oh, I get it. Like this is just above and beyond. And also because like I spent a lot of time with this movie. I mean, I spoke to a lot of like people. Um, I spoke to the leader of the NAACP of our local union and a lot of different people about this film. So I think that part of it too is like I've had a lot of conversations about this film and a lot of time to just think about this film. And man, I watched this film 3 times in the span of like 2 weeks, even though it's a 3 hour film. And that, of course, is Spike Lee's Malcolm
Well,
X.
the reason why that one isn't anywhere near my list is because I've already seen that movie. I saw it like a year or two
Ah,
ago.
okay. So
But I do, but I
it's
mean that
not
movie's
first watch.
perfect. Yeah,
Okay. It is. I mean, my God. Oh my God. That
it's great.
every time I hear that Sam Cooke song, which by the way, incredible Sam Cooke song, arguably his best song. I can't not think of that moment in Malcolm X where he's on the
When he's
dolly
going to his last speech.
when he's going to his last speech.
Yeah. Oh man, one of the greatest moments in film history, man. One
It
of the
it
greatest
really, oh
movies.
my God. It just like it makes me smile just thinking about that moment. And like I've gone onto YouTube and just watched that scene a couple of
Yeah,
times,
it's
like when
such a
that
good
song
ass
stuck in my
scene.
head, because that scene is so
Hmm.
good and it is
And like,
so
yeah,
perfect. Oh
and
my
it
God.
also it contains like I think one of the greatest actors ever is Denzel Washington. And so
True.
watching him like do his thing for that long at a very high level is like it's like what more could he ask for?
It's truly everyone just at their best. I mean, obviously, like this is someone who meant a lot to a lot of people in this film, and you can see that, right? You can just see like how much everyone really cares about this, and how much Spike Lee cares about it, and Denzel Washington, and everyone involved. And oh my God, it's so good. It's just like it's mind-blowingly good. Just how hard this film hits you. I mean, it hits you in a way that so few films do. And honestly, it's probably like my top 10 films of all time. Malcolm X is probably on
Mhm.
that list because it's a 5 star. You know, I don't go around throwing 5 stars all the time, but this is truly a 5 star experience because my God, Malcolm X is just everything you want from a film. I mean, it is beautiful, it is funny, it is dark. Denzel Washington gives one of the greatest performances of all time. Of course, we
Yeah.
talked about that scene with the Sam Cooke song. A lot of like small performances that like I can never remember the guy from Breaking Bad. What's his name?
Bryan Cranston.
No, the one
What?
that's in Malcolm X.
Um oh, it's he's in a lot of
He's
I
in a
always
lot of
forget his
stuff.
name. I always forget his
He's in a
name.
lot
I
of
always feel bad.
Spike Lee stuff.
He's in a lot of Spike Lee movies,
Yeah,
that's for sure. It's sorry, I'm checking real quick
you're
because yeah,
good.
I agree. He needs to
It
um
deserves to be
we need to
called out.
yeah, he needs his name called out, that's for sure. Um it's um
Let's see if I can find it first.
oh, Giancarlo Esposito.
Yes.
Great actor. Amazing actor. He's so good.
Amazing. And even though he has a small role in this film, like his performance is on point, right? We talk about that
Yeah,
moment, and
he's
I
really
think about
good.
this moment all the time. Like this moment is like stuck in my brain forever, like as one of those moments in cinema history where Malcolm X's daughter drops the doll, and
Oh
he
yeah, and he
picks it
picks
up,
it up
right? And
for her. Yeah, it's
he has
so
that big
good.
smile on his face, and he hands it to her,
Oh,
and
what a good
immediately like
actor, man.
it goes from that
Haley
smile to
Wilson.
like just that like
He's gonna fucking kill
evil.
Malcolm X. Yeah.
It's amazing. It's like if I were to teach an acting class, which I'm not an actor by any means, although I've worked with a lot of actors, like that would be like the moment. I'd be like, this is acting. Like this is what we're
Yeah,
trying
he's
to
so
do.
good.
Oh my God. Just everything
Yeah.
about Malcolm X. And like I said, you know, Spike Lee's other stuff. I mean, of course, like there's some great Spike Lee films. I think of, oh,
Do the
why
right
can't I
thing.
remember? Do the right thing.
I
I
like
don't know
School
why I
Days
couldn't
and Hell.
remember.
I like Inside Man. He got game,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Sure.
Um, Spike Lee has a lot of features and a lot of them like I haven't been I've seen like a handful, but there are also plenty of his earlier movies that are apparently really, really good that I haven't gotten
Mm-hmm.
around to, like Bamboozled and stuff like that.
Really want to see. I've been wanting to see Bamboozled for a long time, but I can never find it anywhere. Like it's a really hard film to
Yeah.
find for whatever reason. I don't know why. I think I found that with a lot of Spike Lee stuff though. I don't know. I think it's because like he owns a lot of his own stuff, which is great, but that also means that often it can be hard to find his stuff. But
Yeah.
Malcolm X, it's really just above and beyond. And you know, I've seen quite a few Spike Lee movies coming into this. A lot of his early work, certainly most of his newer work. I think I've seen like every new films he's released in like the last 5 years, but nothing can compare. Not only from Spike Lee, but honestly, almost anyone of this era. I think it's one
Right.
of it's probably the best biopic ever made, and probably going to be one of the best
Yeah, I
biopics
would say it's
ever
up there for
made.
me. Yeah. Yeah.
Because oh my god, it's amazing. But
Yeah.
that's my list, and that's your
Cool.
list. That's our
Yeah, that's my
list.
list. That's pretty much it. Yep.
All right, should we
Yep.
wrap it up then?
Yep. I think that should be good.
All right, y'all. Thank you for listening. You can find this podcast wherever you hear podcasts. You also find us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at With Nothing to Say.
I'm on Letterboxd at Retro Andrew, RETR0 Andrew.
And you can find me at Austin Lugo 12 or just Austin Lugo. And thank you all for listening.
Thanks so much.